Okay, welcome back to another episode of Better Than I Found It, the podcast all things college golf. You're listening to Mike McGraw, the men's golf coach at Baylor University. Today's guest on Better Than I Found It is newly hired head men's golf coach at Duke University, Bob Heintz. Now, Bob's first career was actually a successful PGA Tour career. He played in over 200 Korn Ferry events before getting onto the PGA Tour, where he saw a 6-year run on the tour and before getting into coaching. His first stop was the University of Pennsylvania, where he led his team to an Ivy League championship, and then onward to Duke as an assistant coach for 8 years. On June 26th, Bob was hired as the new men's golf coach at Duke. And he's got a unique perspective, I think a great perspective, and he's coming from a player's background, which I think makes him a very credible coach. But I do like him, I respect him, and I think you'll enjoy this interview. Okay, all the Better Than I Found It listeners out there, join me in welcoming Bob Heintz to the podcast today. Bob, thanks for joining me on Better Than I Found It.
Coach McGraw, great to be here. I'm just so happy I ran into you at the U.S. Junior, and I'm really thrilled, and it's an honor to be with you.
Oh, this is great. You know, it's funny. I'd known you'd gotten hired, so I was thinking, well, I got to get him on the podcast here sometime soon. But I was so busy trying to recruit players that week, and you were as well. But when I saw you, and sometimes it's just in passing. I was there a lot that week, you were, and we just saw each other for 2 seconds. But I'm glad I came up with the idea, hey, Bob, join me on the podcast, and you said you would, and thanks for being here today.
You got it. Considering your list of guests so far, I feel pretty humbled to be asked to join you.
Well, you know what? I guess you can you can show humility there if you want, but you're an pretty impressive guy to me. I've watched from afar your career take place. I've watched you as when you were a professional golfer, so I've known about you for a long time. But I'm glad you've joined the ranks of Power 4 Conference Division I head coaches. So congratulations on that. And I know you're ready. I mean, you're hitting the ground running, I would assume, right?
Absolutely. Yep. We we had a lot of success here with Coach Green, so it's not like I have to come in and redo everything. It's just kind of putting my own stamp on it as we go forward. So
absolutely,
it's really made it a little bit easier that way. We're not starting from scratch.
You know, I did basically the same thing. I went basically from being an assistant coach for a long time at Oklahoma State to I was a women's head coach 1 year, and then the head men's coach. It was a whirlwind for me. You know, for one, I always felt like that, and it's been 40 days now you've had the job, but you want kids to see your face, because for many, many years, Jamie was the face of Duke men's golf. And so now it's you, and they've got to see who you are, even though you were an assistant coach and you were very involved with the program. Don't you think that's been a big thing for you, just getting seen by players?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's a little bit of a change of guard. Most of them have talked with me. Some of the current year recruits have spoken with me in the past. So that part hasn't been too bad, but getting out there, trying to do the administrative stuff you have to do in the first 2 or 3 weeks while also getting out there it's been tough. I've had some nights where I went to bed and I thought, man, there's another 7 or 8 things I should have done today, but we're going to have to just keep our head down and do it tomorrow.
You know, one advantage you do have, though, over becoming the head coach at, say, a university you've never been at, is the transition's got to be a little bit smoother, because you know the processes, you know the people on campus, you know who to go to when you have a question. I mean, so that part about the transition probably has been a little easier, hasn't it?
That's been great. Yep. Our compliance officer, Caitlin Purdy, she's in my corner. We have a fantastic director of operations that we brought on last year, Elise Gentili. She's been really helpful, just helping me not forget stuff. We go sit down every morning and go, all right, what are the priorities today? What do we really need to get taken care of? And certainly the administrative staff, A, for giving me the opportunity, but B, knowing them already and having their support has made it a bunch easier. Yep.
Yeah, I remember the same thing at Oklahoma State when I took over. And then when I got to Baylor, I kept my assistant coach that I had because that was in place because I figured what better way for transition in this summer of recruiting if I have a guy in the office that knows what's going on. And Ryan Black did an amazing job for me that first, well, all 6 years he worked for me. So I'm glad your transition's been good. And let's just jump right in here and talk about Bob Heintz and your career. I know all about your years as a professional golfer, and we're going to get to that in a minute. But the truth is, the seeds for your coaching career, they were planted pretty early on. In other words, you came out honestly, didn't you?
Yeah, I think you might be talking about my roots. My father, Bob, he's also Bob. We call him Coach. Of
Okay.
course, he coached high school basketball for 30 plus years in the Clearwater, Florida area. He was a huge Dean Smith disciple, the old UNC coach. So that kind of disciplined practice is what I grew up with, and a guy who was there to help, but also, left me a lot of free reign to learn things on my own. He wasn't a golf coach; he was a basketball coach. So a lot of my golf I figured out on my own, but he was there to support, and of course, my mother was a good athlete as well. Um, I come from a coaching background. My brother's actually coaching for the Phillies now. He's a single A hitting coach for the Clearwater Threshers organization in the Phillies single A. So just a ton of that in our family. And so when I got to a stage in my playing career and I had to figure out what I was going to do next, it was basically I was going to go either sell stocks and bonds for Wells Fargo or go share what I had learned over the past 20 years playing golf. And I decided to stick with what I knew best, what my true expertise.
I think that was a wise decision on your part. I honestly can't even, I have no idea what I would do if I wasn't coaching golf. I'd probably be involved with golf, but I can't imagine doing anything else in another profession, another arena. I just think, but I've been doing this a lot longer than you, but you've been doing it how long now? You're coaching for about 13 years, 14?
That's correct. It's coming
Yeah.
on 14. Yes, sir.
So you're not what you'd call a novice coach. You've been doing it quite a while, but one thing you and I share in common is we were both older assistant coaches. When I became Mike Holder's assistant coach, I was 37. I'd been coaching high school golf for 10 years. And then I was his assistant for 7 years. So I was 45 and still an assistant, or 44. Then I became the head women's coach and then became the head men's coach. But when I got let go at Oklahoma State, I went to Alabama and became an assistant coach again. And so I was an assistant coach at 53 and 54. We share that. I think it was a huge advantage for players and for the coach I worked for each time that I was older, maybe more mature. And how do you think that's played out in your career?
Well, I think the job at Penn, being the head coach there and doing it all by myself, no assistant coach. We had a great volunteer coach, Doc Gordon, but I was doing everything. And I think I did that just long enough to create my own style, but not be stuck in my ways. So when I was able to make the move to Duke and start working for Coach Green, I still had a lot to learn. And he, of course, was a veteran coach. So I think what really that helped, having that 5 years at Penn and sort of figure out how do I convey my messages, but the perspectives that I was able to bring at that age. If you compare a 55-year-old to a 23-year-old, some of these young assistant coaches are amazing. No knock there. They're all knocking it out of the park. But, I brought like 7 different perspectives. My professional golf career, I was a head coach. I was a golf instructor also while I was at Penn. So I was giving lessons, teaching summer camps. And then my kids were all right around, high school, college age at that time. So I was dealing with people at this age level day in and day out, helping them achieve their dreams. So being a parent of that age, I think I just brought a bunch of different perspectives as an assistant coach that you might not be able to have if you were, fresh out of school or 3 years off the mini tours, like some of the guys.
You mentioned young coaches. There's so many great ones today that are and young assistant coaches, not just young head coaches, but that are absolutely doing an amazing job. And they don't have the same limitations or ceiling that I felt like I had 30 years ago. I feel like I was always a little too cautious and careful when I was a younger coach. I see that they are very confident in what they know, and they're a little bit more experienced. But I also think so. I think that's fantastic for the new generation of coaches, a bunch of good ones. But I also think you were a very seasoned. How old are you now, Bob?
55.
So you were
55.
47 to 55 when you were Jamie's assistant coach.
Correct.
And a former really good player. So I've got to think the players benefited great at Duke having you around. One, they had a really seasoned coach in Jamie, but then you gave a different perspective and came from a player's background. Really good.
I think it gives, there's a bunch of coaches out there who played pro golf, and it gives you a little bit of street cred right off the bat. If I have something to say about how to hit a wedge shot, maybe there's a little higher percentage chance that young man's going to listen and at least give it a try. The other thing I love doing is walking with guys, and Coach Green seemed to have a knack for knowing when somebody needed to have Coach Bob run along with them and help them squeeze out a few extra shots. I mean, we've had multiple examples of that. Last one was I got to run with Brian Kim for the last 2 rounds of the Reno Regional, and we got him through there and got him to the national championship. And I like to think I helped him shave off a couple shots those 2 days.
I've done it every way possible, but the most enjoyment I get is when I do get to walk with one player, basically from the time he gets the scorecard till he turns that scorecard in. You learn so much about a kid. And I think if you just hand him a bottle of water twice around or just see him a couple times on par threes, it's just not as fulfilling for me. I really enjoy walking with the guy.
That's great. I think on the flip side, you want to build a team where they don't need you there. Of course, one of the things I've observed on that, especially at the national championship, the last 2 years we were unfortunate to not have our team there, but having an individual there, I was able to observe quite a bit when my guy wasn't playing, and things move so fast in match play. The matches are spread out. The coaches can only be with certain people at certain places, and those guys better be ready to go, independent, making good decisions and confident. And so I think that's the ultimate goal for all of us, is to build a team where they don't need you there. But you're right. It's a real treat to walk in an entire 18 holes and go through the process with them over and over and see where their head is as the round progresses.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can have really good, healthy conversations after the tournament that are pretty telling. You learn a lot about his perspective of what just happened compared to yours. Generally, you're less emotional than the player is because it's not your score. So you can kind of see it a little clearer sometimes than he does. But I do agree, you don't want the player dependent upon you being there. It's just good if you can be there occasionally. So, So you were a great player. You played at Yale. I'm already impressed that you got into Yale, because I could not have done that. There's no way. And you were the only 3-time individual champion in the Ivy League, which is incredible. In fact, I think it was your senior year, you won by 13 shots. So you were obviously the class of that league. Then you coached at Penn for 5 years, another Ivy League team. Had great success there. You were coach of the year one year. Your team won the league championship. And you've been coaching at Duke for 8 years. During another really successful run for a school. So you've been that. But the question I have for you is, you played for and you've coached at literally only academically prestigious institutions. I mean, these schools, when you think of Duke, when you think of Penn, when you think of Yale, you probably think of the academics first. Those schools are all really impressive. What's your secret sauce? How in the world have you figured this out to be successful at all those places?
Oh, man. Can this be a short answer or a long answer?
Either one. You tell me.
The Yale thing, I fell into my lap a little bit. I applied to 4 schools only, Stanford, Yale, Duke, and UNC. Got waitlisted at UNC, rejected at Duke and Stanford. The only reason I applied to Stanford, you'll enjoy this, I spoke with Wally Goodwin on the phone, and he was about to leave Northwestern, and he said, you're kind of a late bloomer. Why don't you just apply to Stanford and maybe I can get you to walk on? And of course, out of state admissions at Stanford is brutal if you're not supported. So I didn't get in there. The last letter I got back when we got letters in the mail was the fat envelope from Yale. So I basically had to go to Yale because I didn't get in anywhere else, which that was my fault for not applying to a safety school. But that worked out. I went there to play basketball, as a matter of fact. And then I quickly realized that I was not the best point guard at Yale at that time. And I said, man, I know I can play golf here. And Coach Patterson let me try out and walked on the team. And all of a sudden I'm in the starting five at the end of my freshman year. But my parents told me when I went there, do your best and have a really good balanced experience. And that was it. They didn't tell me I had to get straight A's. They didn't tell me I had to go be anything except somebody who worked hard at it. And so I kind of got to set my own agenda and quickly decided that I was going to major in golf and economics. I was a double major, golf and economics. I would not schedule a class, after 1 p.m. in any semester. I set my own schedule. We didn't have team practices really back then. So all my classes were in the morning. I ate lunch. I drove out to that beautiful golf course at Yale, and I stayed there until the last second I could. And then I drove back before the dining halls closed, and I had dinner, and then I studied until I fell asleep and did it all again the next day. So that was just me just navigating my own course. And so when you think about Penn and Duke in a similar way, that's all we're asking of these, young men and women is come in here, have good habits. If you have good habits, the school is not as hard as people think. It's hard to get in, but if you're diligent and you're showing up and you're doing what you need to do, you're going to be fine. And that plays out. You see all the GPAs are very high. So it's really not that big of a difference. We don't do as many online courses as maybe some other schools. So there is the element of having to go to class, but it's really finding the people who want that, want to be associated with that type of brand, who want to have that level of education and that experience. And then, it's a little narrower band to recruit in because some kids just, that's not what they're looking for. But when you can find a really good player who wants that brand, that experience, that's when you hit the home runs.
Well, you bring up a good point, too, that a lot of kids really don't understand. You can be a good student and a great golfer. You can be both. They're not mutually exclusive. And you talked about that discipline of just taking care of your business on that. I think that's the biggest part about it. I think you can be a great student and still be a great golfer if you're disciplined.
Yep. Our team is way more disciplined than I was in school. I mean, I brought books with me to every tournament. That's back when we actually had books and we didn't do everything on the laptop. But, I'd bring the books and never crack them. And these guys, if you're sitting waiting for a plane for a half hour, the laptop's open and they're going for it. And I'm really impressed with that. I did it mostly on memory. I had a pretty darn good memory, so I could sit there and, look over 7 or 8 pages of notes before a final and pretty much regurgitate that on the page the next day. So for me, I was lucky. It wasn't quite as much of a grind as it might be for some, but the habits are enormous. If they're good, it's not a big deal at all.
Well, we've talked about your coaching, and we're going to get into a little bit more of that later. But I want to talk about your pro golf career because you mentioned that some coaches have been good players. I could think Greer Jones won 3 or 4 times on the tour and coached at Wichita State and was successful. Jerry Haas was a Korn Ferry winner and he played on the PGA Tour. Mike Small, the list is actually a little bit bigger than most people think of college golf coaches that played professional golf. You played the Korn Ferry a long time. You had 200 starts on the Korn Ferry. You won a couple of times, couple of runner-up finishes, 7 top 5s. you played 6 full seasons on the PGA Tour. You never won, but you were, I think, runner-up in the 2010 Reno Tahoe. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes.
And you finished that was your best finish. But what I remember you as, and I was recruiting Casey Wittenberg when I was an assistant coach at Oklahoma State, and he was in the tournament at Hartford. And so I flew up there, and I guess you got paired with him in the first 2 rounds. And I remember I knew who you were, and you weren't a top money winner on the tour, but you were one of the best putters on the tour. And I knew these stats. That year, in fact, you led the PGA Tour in putts per round, 1 putt percentage, and you set a record 1.62. That's putts per green hit. Is that correct? Is that what that was?
Putts per green in regulation.
In regulation.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
That record stood for 20 years. That's unbelievable. So I remember you as not only a really good professional golfer, but as one of the best putters on tour. So that's a pretty good thing to think about, isn't it?
It's really fun to look back at. I wish I was better at keeping my job on the PGA Tour, because those records are really cool. I think we joked about this at the U.S. Junior. I led the tour in putting a couple of years, and I also led in penalty strokes incurred in those 2 years because I was a little wild off the tee. And we've all learned since then how important it is to drive it well and drive it a long way. I didn't have trouble with hitting it a long way. It was finding it after I hit it was the problem. But the putting, that was, I think, a combination of things. I was, especially in my youth, extremely arrogant about my start line. I just knew I was going to start it on line. Even when I was nervous, I managed to convince myself that my hands, even if they were shaking a little, I was going to start it on line. And then my touch was really good. I prided myself on leaving balls near the hole. I really didn't like to have 4-footers for my second putt. And I also, referring back to the memory thing, before we had Straka, I used to put all kinds of arrows all over the place in my yardage book. But once I put that arrow down, I kind of had a visual of it, so when I had played a golf course before, I could pretty much tell you what balls we're going to do on every section of the green. So I think that was a huge, when you know what that putt's going to do, it's a massive benefit.
That's great. Do you think you've been able to help players on your teams be a better putter? Some players anyway?
I think some is a key word. I would say, certainly green reading, because I'm able to offer them several different perspectives on that. They don't have to do it the way I do it, but just having really good conversations about what are you seeing here? How are you, are we talking about energy? Coach Green liked to talk about how long the putt took to get to the hole. I like to talk about energy. Some people are spot putters. I think I can talk about all those, but I love the way I did it, of course. But yeah, there's been a couple guys that I didn't help as much as I wanted to. And that might have just come down to the fact that I'm not giving putting lessons on a daily basis. So there's people who are just experts in that, they're dealing with Sam Putt Lab. They're way more advanced on, high level technique. Whereas I'm kind of an old school, it should feel like this or look like this. So I can help to a certain degree, but if there's a guy really struggling with some technical stuff, we probably need to bring in an expert on that one.
Maybe the best putter in the 11 years I've been here at Baylor is Johnny Kiefer, who's playing really well on the Korn Ferry right now. Johnny and I read putts identically. And no other kids that I've coached in the last 10 or 15 years were literally spot on. So he was a much better putter than I am or ever was. And he started the ball in line more consistently than I ever did. So he was great with the start line, but we were both spot putters. So I would always point out something at the high point of that putt and say, if you roll it past this, is that a good spot? And he'd say, Coach, left edge of that. And so I had no problems reading putts for him. Some kids, I can't read a putt for. I have no chance. So I'm jealous when a guy like you can do it. So tell me this. Go ahead.
No, that's okay. It's funny you mentioned that. I was coaching a little bit on Matt Thurman's awesome Instagram post a couple of days ago. He was talking about their putt speed sheet that they use at ASU. I'm afraid I may have to steal that from Coach Thurman if he wouldn't put it out there publicly if he didn't want to share, I guess. But learning their language, I think, is huge, and I'm sure you're trying to do that as well. So before I ever go try to read a putt for a guy on the golf course, I'm definitely going to have a conversation about how he sees things, and if we don't see him the same, I'm not going to do a lot of green reading for that guy.
I'm with you, and if I haven't read putts for him in Waco, I don't know why I would read putts for him, in Cleveland. It's like if I can't read him here in town, I probably can't read him for him on the road. So I try to be smart about that. So you played how long? 20 years of professional golf almost?
Give or take. With the,
Yep.
I had a stop start in the early '90s. I went and got a job for a little bit, but really solid from '97 all the way through to 2012, summer of 2012. That was a good stretch.
Okay. Well, most memorable pairings. Give me a couple of them.
I wrote down a few of these for you because you helped me with the prep. But my first cut I made on the tour, I got paired with Steve Stricker and Fred Funk on the last day of the Bob Hope out in the desert. So a 3-day cut, and I got to play with them. And Fred Funk never missed a fairway and shot 65 the last round and complained about his putting the entire way around. And he said,
Stricker never missed a putt, though, did he?
No, Steve didn't complain about much. He was much quieter, but Fred kept telling me if I putted like you, I'd win this thing. And I said, man, you shot 65. I don't want to hear it, So that was a good one. I got to play with VJ in the final round of the Canadian Open at Shaughnessy out in Vancouver, which is a fantastic course. He was super quiet the first 9 holes. I don't know how much you know VJ, but I had it in my mind I was going to let VJ come to me. I was keeping my mouth shut on that one. Once he got his driver sorted out after 9 holes, we had a good time on the back 9. But I let him run it how he wanted to. I played with Jesper a couple times. That was really neat. Great ball striker. A young Aaron Baddeley, fresh on the tour.
Speak of good putters.
Yeah, exactly. Funny moment with him. We were in San Antonio, and he kept just running his first putts past the hole. And I was probably like 40 at that point, and I really didn't want to have 4 and 5 footers, for my comebackers at that stage of my career. Finally, after he did it like 4 times, I said, I don't think it would be cheating for me to give you this advice. Downhill fast, uphill slow. Could you stop running it by 6 feet every time? He's like, don't worry about it, Bob. I make all those coming back. Don't worry about it. So he was cool. I played with a young Jason Day. He was fantastic as a young man coming on tour. So yeah, really got to see some of those young guys on their way up. Oh, another awesome one was Anthony Kim. His first Q school. We were playing in the desert at PGA West on the stadium course, which for everyone else is really scary, but not for Anthony Kim. That happened to be his home course at the time. And I'll never forget, he ripped driver and then driver off the deck on number 11 at the stadium at that green and hit it on the front fringe in 2 with the water just right up against the side of the green. And I was thinking, man, there's no way I do that. And he just had no fear. He just was ripping driver all over the place. It was really cool to play with a kid like that who he just knew he was going to be good. Just knew he was going to be there.
He was uber talented. When I was coaching at Oklahoma State, Pablo Martin was the college player of the year in the middle of a college player of the year season. And we were at Golf Club of Houston, which I think when they played the tour event there, it was maybe called Redstone. But regardless, it was firm and fast and playing really hard. And I remember coming in at the last round, and Pablo had finished the tournament, 54 holes, 1 under. And he looks up at the scoreboard, and there's Anthony Kim, the University of Oklahoma, 8 under. And he looks at me and he says, Coach, I don't have 7 more birdies. There's no way I've got 7 more birdies. Anthony was talented.
Yep.
Uber talented. Okay. Favorite practice round playing partner? Who did you generally get into practice with?
Well, my man John Rollins just turned 50. VCU guy. He and I, we were we had about a 5-year stretch where we kept going back and forth between the tour and the Corn Ferry Tour. So we started traveling together. He even actually built a house across the street from me in the Clearwater, Florida area. And we lived across the street for a while. So that was my guy. We played a bunch of practice rounds together. Our first tour practice round ever was in Hawaii at the Sony. And the two of us are in line, waiting. It's the first event of the year, so everybody's fired up. They're all showing up at 9 a.m., and here's the two rookies. And John Houston rolled up. He had won the event, set our scoring record there either the year before or 2 years before. And he asked if he could join us, and we said, hell yes. Yes, sir, please do. That was fantastic. So, yeah, John Rollins was my guy. I'm hoping he does a really good job on the Champions Tour.
Yeah, he's a good dude. Really good guy. Okay. Well, that's a playing career. Very impressive. You can, I guess, call upon those years and the experiences you had, maybe hopefully continue to help players as you coach. But I've got somebody I think could be a help for you, and that is Dan Brooks, the women's golf coach at Duke. You've been around Dan for 8 years off and on, I'm sure. On the women's side, he's an icon. He's just been amazing, his record for so many years. Do you ever just sit around and talk coaching with him? And if you do, what's the most significant thing you've learned from Dan?
I would say more so over the last year, he's been great. I mean, I had to walk past his office every day to get to my assistant coach office, and his door is always open, and it was great to go in and sit down. And I think he shares a similar philosophy as we talked about earlier, and Coach Whithouse, his associate head coach, is the same way. They're looking to build professional golfers. Really, they feel like it's their duty to make sure that when their women leave, they know their business, top to bottom. And so we've talked a lot about that, how they structure practice or how they structure travel. They try not to do a lot of hand holding. They want to have super independent players. And I've even witnessed him at the national championship. We got there early and at the Blessings in Arkansas when they won, I believe it was 2019. And we got there early, and I was kind of surprised how Dan kind of stood back a lot and let the women do their thing. And I think that shows a lot of confidence in his players. And it also, it's like, all right, we've already done the work. You just go out and perform. So that kind of attitude is, I have a lot to learn from him. And they're really, the two of them, and I say that, they're a true team, him and Whithouse. They have just amazing systems in place. They never look like they're hurried. They never look like they're, out of sorts. And so the more I can learn from them, the better, because they have a really tight ship running. And so, the golf course, he's asked me about his golf swing. He's always revamping his swing, Coach Brooks. And I've given him a couple of nuggets, but he does a better job himself, I think, just looking in the mirror. But it's a good relationship. I hope it gets even stronger as we keep going forward.
I hope he keeps coaching for a long time. He's been good to admire from afar, as far as I'm concerned. And the 1 year I was the head women's coach at Oklahoma State, I got to spend some good time with him that year, and it was really, really awesome. So speaking of coaches, your first assistant coach hire, I assume since you didn't have one at Penn, this is the first time you've ever hired one. Right. Daniel Bowden, who was the head men's coach at North Carolina Wilmington for 8 years, I guess. Mm-hmm. I followed his career. He's a great young coach, terrific guy. What do you like about Daniel, and why do you think he's an asset for the Duke men's program?
Daniel, I have never met anybody who doesn't really like Daniel Bowden. I mean, he's coached camps with us when Jamie's run his summer camps over the past few years. So I've seen him, the goofier side of Daniel Bowden, coaching 12 to 15-year-old kids and hanging out in camp. I've also witnessed him coaching his own team when they come play in our Rod Myers Invitational. I've seen the professional side of him. Our other coach, Jamie Gearhart, has always taken individuals to Coach Bowden's event, the Seahawk, in the spring, and he's always been very impressed with him. So this hire was we had more conversations about whether this was the right thing for Daniel Bowden uh, than whether it was the right thing for me or Duke Golf, because that part's pretty easy. His golf swing knowledge, his tech knowledge, he's probably a better recruiter than me, and we can talk about that. I heard you talking with Coach Bradley last week. The assistant coach needs to fill in your gaps. Daniel's more curious than I am. He probably asks better questions. His tech knowledge is better than mine. So there's a lot of stuff he does better than I do. And the fact that he's done it almost by himself for so many years, it was easy for me, right? I just wanted to make sure it was the right thing for him and his career at this point.
Well, I appreciate you saying all those things about him. I know it's why you hired him, but I sent him a text after he got hired. It was announced, and I told him I thought that was really cool. I knew he would do a great job, but it's sort of a trend in the last 10 to 15 years. Mid-major head coaches taking what looks like a step back, going to become an assistant coach at a Power 4 conference school. But I think it's a great career move. For one, he's getting a different experience. And two, for a very, very successful golf program. I think it's a great move on his part.
I hope so. I mean, honestly, there's a little bit of pressure on me on that. I feel a responsibility to him to try and, help me build a really nice team, or continue to have this be a really good team and have him shine, and maybe have an opportunity at another program after a few years, helping me make this thing awesome.
You'd like for him to be the best coach in the country right now, wouldn't you?
That's fine. He can outshine me. That's fine. We'll be double billed on the billboard if he wants, as long as we're winning.
I've always believed in that theory that it does. If you don't really care who gets the credit, everybody wins if you do that. And I think hopefully you've hired the right guy. I've got Ryan Murphy, who's a wonderful assistant coach, who's better at me in so many areas. And I know that, and that's okay. I don't really care as long as we get better. All right. So those are all good things you've told me today. I really appreciate that. But before we finish, I want to talk about your fall schedule. I looked at it, and there's a couple tournaments I've been to, the Rod Myers Invitational for one, and the Golf Club of Georgia Collegiate. But there's some in there I don't know much about. So let's talk about your schedule this fall.
Well, it's funny you don't know much about them, because I don't either. There's three new ones. The Rod Myers, obviously, we've been hosting that for several years, so that'll be our lead off. The honors course event, this fall schedule was teed up by Coach Green, so I didn't have to come in and make any changes. I just confirmed that we'd be in the field, so I have to thank him for getting us in there. That's just a fantastic club. I've never been there myself, so it'll be a really neat experience for all of us.
You will love it. I'm telling you, you're going to love the honors course.
Well, and I think it'll be a really neat test for me and Coach Bowden to go there, and it's a fresh look for everybody, and it'll be like painting our own picture at the honors course. And then we're going to join Coach Bradley at the Bryan Brothers Collegiate in South Carolina, which sounds like a lot of fun. And then Matt Bryson, the Oklahoma State grad alum, who's running his Bryson Invitational, super gung-ho guy. Been on the phone with him a couple times, and I'm sure that's going to be a great week. We did have a little issue with the schedule where Coach Hepler had to back up a week, which put him right on top of the Bryson. So normally Duke men's golf would not be able to leave campus for an entire week, but it just so happens that's our fall break that week. So we're only going to miss 2 or 3 days of class, not the entire 5. Otherwise I would have had to bail on one of those, and that would have really been unfortunate. So
have you ever been to Bruce's tournament at the Golf Club of Georgia?
We, luckily for us, and I'm going to knock on wood, and I'm going to tell Coach Hepler right on here how awesome he is, because we've been there every year since I've been at Duke.
Unbelievable.
And we've won it a couple times, and he keeps letting us come back. So I would be more than happy to keep playing there for the next few years if he'll still have us.
Yeah, it's a beautiful golf course. I like the tournament a lot better in the fall. We played it in the spring back when I was at Oklahoma State, and it was occasionally a little chilly. That back nine
Yeah.
with 45-degree temperatures and some breeze and spitting rain was one of the toughest 9 holes you've ever seen in your life. So
I'll say, yeah, I can only imagine.
well, that sounds like a really, really good fall schedule for you to get started off on. Is the enthusiasm about as high as it's ever been for you? Excited?
Certainly is. I mean, there's always unknowns in coaching. You know, am I going to get that recruit? Are we going to play well? You know, golf is just, there's no guarantees. You just put your head down and work and try to set the right mood and get people ready, and we'll see how it goes. But yeah, we're fired up. Coach Bowden started today. That was his first day. So it was cool to see him in the royal blue. And so, yeah, the energy is high in the building, and we can't wait for the guys to get back.
Yeah, and you start school when?
They're going to show up around the 20th. Classes start on the 25th.
Same here. Same
We're
exact
gonna-
schedule, Baylor, huh?
Got to do a little retreat weekend right before school up to Wade Hampton. One of our guys has a membership up there, and we've been there the last 2 years in a row, and it's a nice way to start the semester.
Oh, excellent. Well, Bob, that's great. I'm glad to catch up with you, but I'm really excited for your opportunity here. And if enthusiasm has anything to do with it, and obviously your knowledge of the game, I think you're going to have a great year and a great run. So congratulations again on the job, and thanks for joining me on Better Than I Found It. You've been perfect today.
This has been a treat. I wasn't expecting you to invite me on, and you know, any time to spend with you is a true bonus. So thank you very much, Coach.
Thank you. It's been great. So best of luck, and we'll see you down the road.